to have you here. As Elena mentioned, my name is Jillian Phillips, or Jill, and I'm the current president of the NSIS and manager of science education at Discovery Center. I won't go too much into my career as I don't want to take away from folks, but in a nutshell, for anyone interested in science communication, Discovery Center is always looking for students who are in co-op programs to join our team temporarily, as well as join our summer team to do science communication across the province, primarily with summer camps. So if there's any interest there from a career perspective, by all means, connect with me. My career began as an informal science educator with the center, traveling across the province to communicate science. And through my work with Discovery Center, I was connected with NSIS. So I do want to give a little bit of an overview of the NSIS for those folks who are unfamiliar with us. We're the Nova Scotian Institute of Science, and we're a membership-driven, not-for-profit organization, a small society here, promoting science within Nova Scotia and beyond. And we really have a science mission to make science accessible, to get students excited, and to communicate science across our province. And in fact, we've been quite a long-standing organization, dating back to 1862. We've been a major piece of science communication in the Maritimes. Both through the initiatives that we do and through a publication. So we do encourage members of the public, and we offer a wide range of engagements for students, for really anybody who has an interest or passion for science, science communication, science outreach. We engage our members through nights like this evening, putting on career Q&As, to free or low-cost excursions with a science kind of paste to them, to student initiatives such as an annual writing competition where you can submit a piece of writing, a science essay, or a bit of research that you've been working on as a high school student, college student, or as a university student. And there are some great prizes for that as well. And we also have our peer-reviewed journal that we publish annually, if not more frequently, the proceedings of the NSIS. We do a lot of other things. Again, our career symposium, our monthly free public lectures you may have seen, and science fair support, and so much more, but I don't want to take too much time away from our speakers tonight. I do encourage anyone, though, if any of these things interest you, if this is something that you're passionate about, do check out our website. We do offer student memberships, and all of the funds that come from our members directly support initiatives like this evening, like the writing competition, and so on. For anyone interested, I'll pop it into our chat here. You can visit our website for a bit more information, to learn more about becoming a member or just the things that we do across the province. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Alana to get our speaker introductions going. And again, thanks everybody, both students, members of NSIS, and our speakers for being here this evening. We're so excited for lots of engagement tonight.
Thanks, Jillian. Just before we turn it over to our speakers, I would like Audrey to say a couple of words about this evening from a student's perspective, if that's okay, Audrey.
Yes, yeah. So I'm a PhD student or candidate at St. Mary's University. And so I'm on the NSIS Council as a student representative for SMU. I was part of this event last year and part of moderating it this year. And in joining the NSIS as a student representative, my goal is just to help increase the programming available for students in Nova Scotia, to increase student awareness of the NSIS and hopefully get some more students involved in the NSIS in terms of events, and also potentially on council in the future if they're interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Audrey. Okay, so we're going to just cut right to the chase, because I know that you're all here to listen to our speakers and our panelists. And I'm very, very delighted that we have three outstanding speakers in their field and their careers here that are going to speak to us this evening. We have someone representing Build Nova Scotia, and that's Mr. Donnie Burke. He is Senior Director. And we're delighted to have him here. Donnie, if you can just give a wave so everyone, there he is, can see who Donnie is. And then we have Joey Korchesny. Am I saying that right?
Shane, it's French.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Who is a cider maker from Annapolis Cider Company in the Valley. And he's a chemist, and he's going to be talking to us about his career as well. And then we have Malcolm Fennick, who is joining us from the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resource. And Malcolm, if you can just give a wave so students can see you as well. I'm very, very delighted that all three of you could join us this evening and to talk to us about your careers and your paths. So I'm actually going to ask if it's okay, Joey, maybe you can get us started.
Sure.
5-minute introduction. We're not keeping a timer. I'm not going to turn you off. If you can introduce us and talk to us about your career, about how you use science on a regular basis. Yeah, and what it means to you.
Well, my career, I guess, has taken a really random, roundabout way in arriving where I'm at now. I don't want to be misleading, and this maybe is an inopportune time to bring this up. I actually have a theology degree, and I went back and started to redo a Bachelor of Science undergrad after completing my theology degree, and then got into research, like just randomly started working at I worked at a UBC ecology and evolution lab for 4 years, breeding fish, and sort of got into aquaculture and ecology, evolution, genetics. So not a chemist. Ben, my predecessor, was a chemist, but I hope that's not a bombshell right now. Everyone's not like, oh great, who invited the Bachelor of Arts guy? But I do have science undergrad and, a great exposure to the postgraduate part of the science world. Anyways, I'm from BC. I was actually working in IT and really got interested in agriculture, and like sort of as this evolution from aquaculture and working with fish. Yeah, so agriculture, I eventually, after reading a lot of books and getting enamored with silvopasture, I fell in love with the apple tree. I love, it's a survivor. It's been everywhere and everybody loves it wherever it goes. And, I just wanted to be around apples. And did some cider training with the Cider Institute of North America. But in terms of where science intersects my job on a day-to-day basis, it's every day. I'm always mixing reagents, I'm running titrations, I'm measuring acid. And then there's this whole game of where that, I guess not a game, but the interface between that and your taste buds, like what tastes better. Like I'm constantly looking at, we're dealing with redox potential on a daily basis, pH, the balance of acid and sugar, and that's not just like, oh, it needs more sugar, or oh, it needs more. Like we start there and then we begin to quantify, and we work up and we're going through a series of quantifiable tests to arrive at the product that we want. So in terms of where science, how we deal with science on a day-to-day basis, it is day-to-day, like all of those things, plus I'm sure a bunch of stuff I'm forgetting, and the agricultural component and the raw ingredients itself, right? There's agricultural science that absolutely pours into that, and management and cultural practices of the farms that we deal with, and leaving stuff, even if it's just leaving apples on the tree so that more sugar can be produced for another 2 weeks, right? Instead of more starch. And so we're realistically measuring and then setting goals and then figuring out a way to optimize where that interacts with, your tongue and your mouth and your nose and your eyes. So I don't know if that made any sense, but hopefully some.
It did. That was awesome. That was really awesome. Donnie, can I ask you to introduce yourself to the students?
Sure. I've been a lot longer in the tooth when I think about it out of school. I started in a 2-year chemistry. I started in the 2-year chemistry program at UCCB. So we're going back to before the Cape Breton University was the University College of Cape Breton. However, at the time, UCCB didn't offer a degree in chemistry, only in biology and the sciences. So I had to leave. So I looked at, I applied to Acadia. I looked at pharmacy at Dal. Weighed all my options. I went through the interview process at Dal, and luckily I had a very um, interesting. The dean of the pharmacy school at the time sat me down and had a chat with me. And my professor at CBU at the time was Ramameli Palapu. And he said, well, you've got the talent for it in the marks, but I don't know if it's for you. He said, I played soccer for UCCB at the time. I was an outdoorsy type person. And he said, pharmacy might not be for you. Go have my friend is the dean, go have a chat with him. They quickly learned that it wasn't my, my interests would lie elsewhere. And I'm sure every student here struggles with it. I have 3 children. My oldest has graduated now and actually works for CBU in the accounting department. But I have a daughter that's in her 4th year chemistry at CBU, applying to med schools. And I have a son that's in his 2nd year of business. So the biggest thing, I guess, from me, with me going through is deciding where the hell I want it to go and what I want it to do, because, the world's your oyster, as they always say, right? I had friends that were in the environmental program at the time. Environment at that point was just starting to blossom in terms of the environmental science and the stewardship and management of the environment. So I said, oh, well, I can stay in Cape Breton, live at home and try environment. So I did that, went through a co-op program, had some wonderful work terms. I was in the co-op program. I worked with Environment Canada. I worked with 2 consulting companies, and I've kind of settled into that. So fortunate for me, they did offer a degree. So I graduated in 92 with my diploma. The degree came up at UCCB at the time and converting to CBU, and I finished my degree in 99. So seven years later. I jumped around in my career, similar to Joey. I've been always in the sciences, I guess, but I've jumped around the sciences. So I started with Nova Scotia Power, and I worked in a special studies group with Nova Scotia Power. Did a lot of work on air monitoring and air modeling. Get into that realm, and of course, a lot with waste management, with industrial waste. So that kind of the themes kind of resonated with me. Funny, my kids always say, what were your favorite courses at UCCB when you went there, right? And ironically enough, I wasn't one to take geology. Back in Cape Breton at the time, it was mining and it was rocks for jocks, right? People kind of joked about it. But you know what? It turned out to be probably my favorite course overall, and the course that I use most throughout my career, because my career in consulting, of course, I ended up doing geotechnical consulting and environmental consulting. And of course, they go hand in hand. You're digging out contamination and then you're backfilling around buildings. So you have to make sure that they're technically sound, and geotechnically, you're not knocking buildings down or they're not falling down. So I guess my thing was, from a student perspective, I've been a lifelong learner. And I think that's what I'd encourage anybody that's going through school to do. Don't give up on it. Once you get a job, keep going. So I've graduated from St. Mary's with a certificate in financial management. I've graduated DAL in a certificate in total quality management. I have I'm a project management professional. I did my PMP through the Project Management Institute. So I've kind of kept going all along and done that. But you know, I've had a great career. I was telling my staff here today, thinking about what I did, because I jumped from consulting after Nova Scotia Power. Our division was cut in half. Half the division was laid off. I went back to work as a private consultant for Nova Scotia Power, and then of course brought my business with me to a consulting firm, and still did that work for under the umbrella of a consulting firm, but learned more things. I'm a strong advocate of never saying no. I always say maybe, or let me try that. And I've kind of instilled that in a team. So my day-to-day, I manage a team of 8 professionals. 4 of them are engineers. I have a mining engineer, an environmental engineer, a civil engineer, and I've got a biologist and another environmental technologist and another Bachelor of Technology student in public health. So we've got a diverse group. My main work in day-to-day lately has been mines. So we look after all the historic and abandoned mine sites in Nova Scotia that are on Crown lands. So I'm all over the province. I guess my big claims to fame in terms of my career, I guess I jumped over the fact that I worked for CBRM, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, for 10 years. And I was the Public Works Operations Manager for the Sydney area. I managed streets, water, sewer, and everything along those lines. Then I became the solid waste manager, and I got to introduce composting into Cape Breton. Before in Cape Breton, we used to incinerate our waste. We had a waste energy facility. So one of my, ironically enough, when I left Nova Scotia Power in an exit interview, they asked me what I wanted to do. I said, well, maybe I'll go back to CBRM at some point and tear down that old incinerator. So I got to tear down the incinerator, which was one of my goals, and I built a central composting facility. HRM actually just built a sister facility in Halifax just this year that's just opening and coming online. So some neat things. And then, of course, from CBRM, I was recruited to go to the Sydney Tarpon's cleanup, and I became the project director for a multidiscipline team. And we did the $400 million cleanup of the Sydney Tarpon's and coke oven site as well. So, you know, a diverse background and never saying no, I guess, is one thing. You know, my people, my staff always say, how do we get into these things? God forbid, we all remember Portapic and the shootings there. It was my crew that went in the cloak of dagger, the cloak of darkness, and actually tore down the property and demolished the property and made it look like it was never there before, because that was something that we're looked upon in government to do. I joke with people and say I'm the janitor of government. Anything that nobody else wants to do or it's contentious, we usually get asked to do and go and do quick hits. But science has been my life. My whole career has been in the scientific field. I manage multidisciplinary teams from engineers to scientists to, I have had some PhDs that worked for me over the years. And the big thing we manage, I guess the province of Nova Scotia has about a $800 million liability fund for environmental remediation, and Build Nova Scotia through my projects and the Boat Harbor project, which I work on as well. We manage about 650 million of that 800 million. So it's kind of an interesting field. It's ever growing. Believe it or not, that's one thing about sustainability is, you know, when you talk about it, in order to do things, we have to upset the apple cart, pardon the pun. But so that's what we kind of come back in and try to fix it or write it to the best of our ability and manage it from that perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Donnie, for that. And last but certainly not least of our panel, Malcolm.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name's Malcolm Fennick. I'm the Mulyumugi Mset Gogumna Program Manager at the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources, or its It's basically our species at risk work. So we're in conservation biology, sort of wildlife management, environmental resources, and we look after those environmental resources for the 5 Mi'kmaq communities on Cape Breton. Um, so the way we approach our work is we use sort of a two-eyed seeing approach. So we put equal importance on science and equal importance or as much importance on sort of Mi'kmaq values and cultural knowledge and combine the two to try to make a really good project. And it works quite well with conservation. Historically, there Mi'kmaq values and knowledge hasn't always been used in our environmental resources and conservation. And so that's kind of where we've come in. And over the last 5 years, we've been doing a really good job leading species at risk work in Cape Breton. Um, Fortunately, a lot of our species at risk are also culturally significant species. So that's another angle that we're working it as well as the cultural side of our work. So it's not just science all the time. We also work a bit on the cultural side as well, which is really interesting. Um, I guess my career path's been a little more straightforward than the previous two speakers. I started at Dalhousie about almost 10 years ago. Did my undergrad in 4 years. Kind of got out because that's out of the province because that's what you did at the time. Um, and went to grad school at the University of Ottawa. Did a master's degree researching freshwater turtles. So pretty cool, super niche, but realized that there was more to work than just turtles. Um, and moved around a little bit. I was lucky enough to get a few opportunities working internationally. So I was able to do some work down in the US, Puerto Rico, and South Africa. So I got to see the world a little bit and then decided Nova Scotia was going to be home and came back. Over the last 10 years, I've definitely seen, especially the conservation fields, grown a lot in Nova Scotia. When I started at Dalhousie almost 10 years ago, the joke was, especially in conservation and other fields in science, is you go to Nova Scotia or you go to school in Nova Scotia for school, and after you graduate, you leave. Um, that's really no longer the case. There's a lot of opportunities here these days, and they're also a lot more widely available. When I was in school trying to get a summer position, um, a lot of organizations didn't really advertise them super well, or you had to know someone who knew someone to get in. Um, a lot more these days. There's all these advertisings online, and there's a lot more available. There's a lot more work being done in our province, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. Um, yeah, I guess how I got into my career as well. I'll say a little bit about that. I started in biochemistry. Figured I wanted to do something that'd make me a lot of money. Took a first year oceanography course and realized I could get a job working with wildlife. Um, and that sort of propelled me into doing my degrees in biology. And a little bit of luck along the way, and I've kind of ended up where I am. Um, it's been a bit more of a straightforward shot for me up until this point. Who knows? We'll see after this job. Might change fields, but it's been really great. And we work not just with wildlife biology, but we also work with a lot of agriculture. Folks who own farms or ranches, we partner with them a lot. Forestry, we look into a lot of these different industries and how we can help wildlife within those industries as well. We're developing a private land project right now, so it's working with landowners. So there's a lot of different avenues, especially in conservation biology these days, that summer students or where you can take your career. So, yeah.
Thank you, Malcolm, for that introduction. Now, what we're going to do, students, is we're going to move into the Q&A portion of the evening. If you would like, if you would, want to ask a question to our panelists yourself, feel free to do that. Just put your hand up and I will unmute you and you can ask the question. Alternatively, please use the chat. We're monitoring the chat, and if you have a question for any one of our panelists, please do that. Put it in, and our moderators will be happy to ask the panel. I am going to turn it over to Jill and Audrey to start the Q&A. We do have some questions to get the juices going in our panel and to get some people starting to think about some of the types of questions they want to ask. So yeah. Jillian and Audrey, over to you.
There we go. Just took a minute to unmute. Thank you. All right. Well, I think you guys touched on some of the things that we have in our Q&A already, which is fantastic. I am curious. Perhaps, do you want to send some general questions out to everyone and just kind of let you circle through them? I think that's great, Elena. Okay. I am curious, looking at your field, what's been more valuable to you? And we can go through each panelist, perhaps your education or your direct experience. That's one that I'm always particularly interested in. Maybe we start with, we can go in order. Maybe Joey first, as in order of introduction.
I really appreciated what Donnie said about being a lifelong learner, because I don't know, I think the two are inseparable as far as classwork and learning in a formal setting and then learning on a job site. Like classroom, school, like however that plays out is always this foundation and ideas are going around, but really it's like an introduction. And then you sort of, it gives you this basis to then maybe not intelligently and intentionally explore that field with your feet on the ground, right? Like you can now like sort of speak the language, you recognize some ideas or some things that people are talking about or the industry is talking about. And then, I don't know, I'm a big believer in fake it till you make it as well. Like, you just kind of like nod your head and go, yep, okay. And like Donnie said too, like just say yes and okay, I'll try that, and away you go, and you're doing something new and crazy. And well, at least in my field, I mean, I definitely have been a cider maker that likes to do weird, crazy things, and so. But I also would say like for me, the classroom setting has always been important because, like, I don't know, I love to meet other people with other ideas and profs or instructors or lab supervisors that have informed my own decision-making process. And then I mean, I still speak to some of those people years later to go, what do you think of this? You know what I mean? I was thinking I was going to try something like this. What do you think? Have you ever heard of that? Or am I way off base? And so I don't know that those, for me, those things have always sort of been intrinsically woven together in this way that I don't know. And I've tried to maybe selfishly foster, I want those people to be in my life still. So you make an effort to try, but I mean, maybe that's getting a little too granular, but I don't know. But yeah, I see the two as things that are together, and nobody knows what they're doing when they get a new job, like even if you're trained, it doesn't, I think that regardless of your education, whenever you're placed into a new setting, you know, it's weird and new, and you're, I guess what I'm getting at is you're always sort of out of your element, and then you sort of find your place in that spot and learn something new and keep going.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I'll pass it over to Donnie then.
Yeah, I
Thank
couldn't
you.
agree with Joey more. I think one of my best resources is colleagues that I've went through programs with. I look back to guys that I graduated with 30 years ago. I've got a friend that works with Alltech Environmental up in Halifax. I've got a friend that works in the airfield with WSP. And I do check-ins with them almost still 30 years after graduating. We do a check-in probably 3 to 4 times a year, whether they're calling me about a question with my project, their projects, or vice versa, right? I think those relationships you build, you hold on to, right? You think about when you're going through school, you're forging some new grounds there, and it's, you know, you're sharing that burden with somebody else in a lot of cases. So huge relationships are a big part of it. I think the education is the foundation for what we do in our careers. You know, in speaking from the geotechnical proverb, you can't build a building without a strong foundation, right? Or a good base. So I look at the base, and in my world right now, a lot of human health risk assessments and ecological risk assessments I'm going through. I rely on my sciences, right? Like my biologies. I don't deal with the birds, bees, and bunnies every day. But I have that foundation in education that I can go back and relate to. And what Malcolm was saying, right? I've got a lot of synergy with the Indigenous peoples, you know, whether it's Boat Harbor, or right now we're actually in an engagement piece on our mine sites that we're going out with, one of our mine sites in Halifax, Montague Mines. So thinking about the ecology and the human health, you know, when I first thought of this, geology was probably my favorite course that I seem to go back to the most. But if you were to look at my bookshelf, I have a microbiology course book, because of, you know, when we think about it, I manage a former landfill site in Halifax, and it's all about coliforms and things like that in the water. You know, the precipitation of uranium into well water, how that's happening through chemistry or the biota. And of course, environmental chemistry was huge for me. But I still go back. Those books are 30 years old, but they still sit there because I know where to go. Believe it or not, I didn't throw those out. There's a lot of books that sit on that shelf that collect dust, but there's certain books that I always go back to, right? Or you know, you guys come up in a different age than me with the internet, where I use it a lot too, but you can jump on and find so much information. And in our field, like in my field in particular, and Malcolm's with the environmental side, for every story, there's always a negative to it. So you have to be prepared for that. So science is a wonderful thing, but science can do what you want it to do, depending on what side of the fence you're on. So it's to understand that, right? I get into one that I have in Halifax, Lake Charles. I have academics, you know, that have published reports on one sample. Meanwhile, I've got 60 samples in the same spot that tell a whole different story. So then I have to go and argue with them and you know, and debate that. So and that all comes back to that foundation in education and what you learn over your career. So to be able to stick handle and navigate these things. Um, One of the, you know, there's two good proverbs I use that were given to me. Not a hill worth dying on, right? Is one that always pops into my head when I'm debating something. Or God forbid this one, no good deed goes unpunished. That's something I learned early in my career from one of my mentors. And you know what? Working in government, that resonates so true at times, or in life. I say it to my daughter. She's sitting in a classroom with friends, and you know, the friends saying, "Well, can I look at your assignment, or can I do your assignment?" And she gets frustrated. And I always say to her, "You know what? You don't be mean, but no good deed goes unpunished." So I guess that would be my life lessons, or answer to that.
Great. Thank you so much. And Malcolm, will pass over to you if you can weigh in.
Yeah, so I guess when we have summer staff applying for our positions, we see a whole range of folks applying. Lots with university undergrad backgrounds who are looking for summer jobs. A lot of folks in Indigenous communities who don't have the educational background, but they've worked on fishing boats, they're hunters their whole lives. So we see a really interesting mix when it comes to specifically our line of work with our organization. And one thing I will say, having both gone through a lot of education and worked quite a few different conservation teams, is your university degree provides the background, but you really establish it when you have a summer job or when you're working in your job. Um, you usually make the connections while you're at university, but then you still need to do a good job once you get the job you're hoping to get. And especially in our field and in Nova Scotia, like I work with, while we're based in Sydney and Eskasoni, we chat with folks across the province. It's still quite a small field, even though it has expanded. So that's where, yes, having that academic background's really important, but you do need skills that you acquire from working in summer jobs, but also once you start working full time, to really establish yourself.
Great, thank you all. And I can echo many of those sentiments. Myself in a science field, yeah, that degree was really kind of the entry point. Might have got me there, but there's so much more learning that happens on the job. And I mean, I'm in the not-for-profit education outreach industry, but I think this is probably true of many industries, that you learn so many hard and soft skills while on the job as well. Where, like, I'm sure all of you have at one point in your careers worn multiple hats. You know, sometimes I'm dabbling in, let's say, HR. I'm a scientist by trade, right? But I'm, working with people. I'm hiring students. So there's lots of hats I think we wear, and that experience really is just as valuable. I don't think we can tease out one as really more important than the other. I think they both contribute. For students, when it comes to, I think, many of us looking at resumes, there are many people coming in with a degree, and that really is the entry point, but seeing the experience you've taken from that degree, and sometimes things very tangential to your degree. The advice I give is diversify as much as you can, try as many experiences as you can, because that may help set you apart and make connections that you may not have otherwise had just with the traditional degree route. So that's my 2 cents on it. If Elena or Audrey would like to weigh in, you're welcome to. Otherwise, Audrey, we can move on to another question. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I think everything that was said is true in my experience as well. So I'll move it on to one of the questions that was asked in the chat. Carol says that she was lucky enough to move to Canada for a great job with DFO, but now hears that in Nova Scotia, it's not what you know, but who you know, and wonders if that has been your experience, and if you panelists think that that's still true, that it's more important who you know than what you know. I think we can stick to the same order. So again, start with Joey.
I mean, I'm from BC, so I mean, I kind of fly right in the face of that. I mean, I think there's elements of that anywhere, right? Like there's elements of when you're entrenched in a community, it becomes sort of easier, or opportunities fall into your lap more readily, I guess, just because you have a lot more connections, right? But I really don't think, I mean, for myself, I got a job as a cider maker because I had a lot of training in cider making and had worked at cideries. Like, I mean, it was my experience and my education directly that got me the job, right? So, and I was across the country. So, I mean, yeah, yeah, I mean, that's really it. Yeah, I think anyone who wants to pursue something and if you have the skills to pursue it, I think if you really go for, I mean, and as cheesy as that sounds, like if you put effort behind it, you can get you can make those opportunities happen for yourself, right? But I mean, I think it comes down to like, are you going to passively sit on your education, or are you going to like go out and be like, hey, look, I've got this degree, I'm excited about this, like let's talk to 50 employers or one or whatever. But yeah, just going out and making it happen.
Great answer. A little more positive than the question might have sounded. Yes, I think we'll move on and see what the other panelists have to say.
So I realized I didn't answer one of your questions at the beginning. So Build Nova Scotia does take students every year, summer students, but we have taken internships. We did CBU has a post-bac in health and safety, so we've taken students the last couple of years in that program as well. And it's a big mantra of Build because, of course, if you look at what we do in Build, we're also building hospitals, and you know, you don't go too many places in Nova Scotia and don't see the logo now, because of how we've kind of come together with the waterfront development in Halifax and Peggy's Cove and things like that. My last two students were Nigerians, so if you're going to say there's some kind of connection there, it's virtually impossible for me. And they were fantastic students, both of them. I always say my personal view, since I've been in my career, who you know, if I know your family and I know they're good people, you'll get an interview, but you have to prove yourself to me to get the job. And that's been my premise. And a lot of my colleagues are the same way. I can get you in the room, but then you have to sell yourself to me. The biggest thing that I see from my perspective, or what I offer to students and I think I'm getting into another question here, but um, it's just prepare, know who you're going to work for. It only takes, like I do it to my kids, I make them sit down. God forbid, I'm probably a horrible parent to some people, but I make them sit down and research the company and understand what they do, who they are, who may be interviewing you, make connections with different things, but look at their projects and understand it, because that's the best thing you can do. I don't really give a crap of who you came from or where you live. I want to know that you've done your homework before you come in the room with me, and I'm not going to waste my time trying to train you and give you, you know, pay you money to develop, when you don't have the gumption to take that step first. So I guess that would be my best advice. And no, I don't think knowing. I was always accused for part of my career that you know, my boss, people said it was my uncle or my godfather, one of my bosses, when I went to work for CBRM, and there was no relation. But the guy knew I worked my heart out and did things, and he advocated me for me to get an interview, and then it was like up to me to sell myself. That was what he told me, so I that's been my mantra.
Great, thank you. Malcolm?
Yeah, it's very similar to what was just said. It definitely helps knowing people or knowing what's out there, but it's really up to the person to, again, sell themselves, and then once you're in the job, to really work on it, and show why you got hired for that. So I think it's more helpful when you're in a job knowing people, because you almost know who's doing what when you're in the job. It's maybe not as helpful when you're looking for a job, if that makes sense. So it's nice knowing what's out there, and it still does happen in all industries usually. And Nova Scotia is quite a small place. Folks are gonna know each other, be related to each other, but I feel like it doesn't happen as often as a lot of people think. We're trying to get the best candidate in our positions. We're not trying to do someone a favor.
Great, super insightful answers there. I don't know, Jillian or Alana, if you want to weigh in with your opinion on that too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I even as a researcher at CBU, I have to say that it's not as much as who you know about who. For me, I hire students in my own research lab who are enthusiastic. It's a really big quality for me and what I'm looking for. I can train students on just about anything, whether it's the pollinators that we're looking at, or the statistical packages that we're going to use to identify our trends in our data. But I can't train enthusiasm. So when students come to me and say, I'm really interested in this, it's something I want to do, come on with me, because then I know that you're in it and you have a passion for it. And that to me is one of the biggest qualities that I look for. We actually have a question for someone online, David, and I'm going to unmute him. Hopefully that works. Oh, there you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi everyone. So I'm a fourth year undergrad at Acadia, and I'm taking biology. I really, really love it. And I took an immunology class last year, and it really sparked my interest. And I really want to get my foot in the door doing more science jobs once I graduate. I'm finding kind of a hard time with just an undergrad level to find a position during like a year-long position where it's not a student job, but it's not like a mature PhD job. And I don't know if you have any advice for someone like me, but
That's a fabulous question. And I think I'll let Joey go first.
I mean, that's tough. The only thing I would say is just be willing to go. Just a willingness to go is, and I mean, maybe that's not what you're looking for, but like look everywhere, like every continent, every job board. I mean, there's something, I don't know, there's always something. One of my friends, when I was working at the lab at UBC, she got a job driving a boat across the country, and like, but it was all about just like look, apply, and just like be willing to just, I don't know, not drop everything, but sort of drop everything and go. And I think you're like, I don't know, Alana, you just said it. Enthusiasm carries the day, right? So I don't know if that makes any sense, but a willingness to just be open to whatever opportunity, I think is, and then to hunt those things down, right? That's it.
I can jump
Donnie,
in.
yeah.
I would, you know what? I think, an undergrad is an undergrad, in my opinion. And you apply for everything. Like I'll tell you what I tell my own kids is there's nothing below you and there's nothing above you. The sky's the limit. So if it's something you want to do in the scientific field, it might not be, for instance, if you're focused on immunology, um, that's one thing, but look at businesses that are involved in that field if that's your passion, and start with an entry. It might be a data clerk. Believe it or not, though, you move through the ranks pretty quick, right? It shows that you're willing to take your lumps. So don't be afraid to take that first step. Take what you can get, and then grow it from there, because it's, pardon the pun, but it's like a seed, right? You're fresh out of school, and take any opportunity you can get and make it work for you. And it likely what my experience is, it grows into connections, and again, your network, right? Growing your network, be involved, get engaged. The fact that you guys are all participating in this is something that shows you have a passion for the sciences and you want to work in it, right? Don't be afraid to say that on your resumes, right? Make sure that you show that you're engaged and involved in the community and you want to be. And you know what? That'll actually blossom for you, truthfully. That's my philosophy, and that's what I tell my own kids, right? And I say kids, but they're young adults. They're kids to me. Don't be afraid to and don't be afraid of rejection, because for every 9 no's, you're going to get a yes, likely, right? That's at least been my experience in life. But just learn from the no's. Don't be afraid. If you ever do an interview with Build, or you come with Build, make sure you call the people up that interviewed you, or the panel chair, and say, could you debrief and give me what I did good and what I did bad, and how I can improve upon myself, because we'll all do it for you. We're not going to volunteer to do it. But I actually ironically enough, I hired a health and safety officer. I chaired a committee, and one of the unsuccessful candidates who I've known for 15 to 20 years called me today, and I gave him honest and frank feedback in terms of what he did very well and what he had to do better. But you know what? Hats off to him that he had the courage to do that, right? And I encourage you all to do the same. You're developing a network by going for an interview, so use it.
Can I add something? Is that weird if I add?
No, go for it.
I would also say, like, if money's not, money's always an issue, but like I volunteered. Like I that research lab that I worked at UBC, I was like, I want to work here. I want to be a grad student in this lab. And I like called the prof and I was like, can I volunteer in your lab? Like, I'll clean the fish tanks. I'll clean the floor. Like, what do you need me to do? I'll wash the truck. And within 4 months, I was the research tech. Like, I mean, the research tech moved on. She did her master's, and then I became the new research tech. So, I mean, like, if you've got your eyes set on like a specific immunology lab or prof or some program that's really exciting, I don't know, I would just blitz it. Like, not like blitz it, but enthusiastically volunteer to be a volunteer. Anyway.
I guess I'm up now. I'll kind of add on to what Joey said a little bit. If you're able to move around, it's great living in other places because you get to see what else is out there as well. I know not everyone has the opportunity for that, but being flexible definitely helps. Speaking from experience, when you kind of limit yourself to certain areas geographically, it you'll limit the number of jobs you can get. So if you have the ability to be flexible, it helps out a lot. As Joey said as well, if you're able to volunteer, I wouldn't recommend it doing like 40 hours a week of volunteering. But if you're able to volunteer for a day or so, that gets your foot in the door. That gets you chatting with the people who are working there full time. Especially if you're an undergrad student, it really helps out. Um, Trying to think. Yeah. Oh, I guess one thing as well that I'd mention, because it's also really big in the environmental and conservation field. Don't be afraid to apply to places that you wouldn't typically think of applying to. So like for-profit companies or consulting, because it gets you experience and gets your sort of foot in the door for jobs like that. So everyone, at least in biology and conservation, wants to work nonprofit for these organizations that are lovely to work for, but it's really hard. It's really hard. So if you're able to be a little bit flexible when you're first starting out, and you may end up loving it. I have some friends who went into consulting and they thought they were going to be out of there in 6 months, and they've been working there for a few years, and the pays really well. They have quite a flexible schedule. You don't have to be working 60 hours a week. So I'd say for what you're looking to get into, try to be flexible with the type of organization or business you're applying for.
Yeah, as I'm still a student, but a much more advanced student, and I can echo like all of those tactics. I feel like I've kind of taken a page out of everyone's book in terms of applying for those shorter term jobs that are super interesting, because if you perform really well at those, you either gain the experience to move on to a longer term position, or those shorter term jobs can become longer term positions in the future, since now you really got your foot in the door and you've shown the employer what you're capable of. Alternatively, I've also taken completely unrelated jobs that were just secure income, and while working in that, also volunteering my time on the side to get more specialized experience in the fields that I ultimately wanted to end up in. So I think you can get creative with it and just get your foot in the door and gain skills no matter what you're doing. There's hard and soft skills that you'll acquire that will ultimately open up more doors down the road.
Great. Adding to that too, I like to always think of the idea that you're never stuck in one field. Maybe I can think of my parents' generation. You went and did your training, and then you were in a career, and that was your career for life. But you're never stuck. There's always opportunities to think about other fields, and so maybe it's exploring a job in a sister field, something that works with the field that you're interested in, but perhaps there's no jobs currently available. Finding ways to make those connections a little bit, maybe more tangentially, but perhaps it's opening doors elsewhere or helping you to explore a field you hadn't considered. So I think it's making connections, it's finding those creative opportunities, like Audrey said, even if it's an unrelated field, while you're developing skills or volunteering to get your foot in the door elsewhere. So yeah, lots of good comments there, guys. Thank you so much. Looking to check the chat to see if there's anything else. There is another question in the chat as well. Are there specific things to avoid saying within interviews and or working within the different industries? Great question. We could throw it to our panelists. And I think perhaps adding to that, maybe if you can think of things that are pluses. I know we mentioned a couple things, maybe not the just laundry list of don't do's, but are there things that you can encourage when in an interview?
Are we going to stick? I'm just going to go.
Sure. If we're comfortable with that.
I mean, I probably have maybe an odd outlook in this way. I've always been I always think I'm gonna try and be myself to a degree, not to a degree, maybe not all the way ADD crazy like I am on a day-to-day basis, but try not to misrepresent myself in the interview, number one, because I also don't want to work at a place that doesn't want to work with me. And I mean, I know that that's maybe different, or that's not a good fit. Maybe that doesn't want to work with me, but it isn't a good fit, right? But at the same time, I mean, I've also just swallowed it and been like, I really want to work here because I know this is going to be great. And I think Donnie said it earlier, just prepping, Googling everything about that place, everything about what they do, I mean, with here, I mean, I looked at every single cider they made. I ordered every cider before I applied, just so I could talk about the ciders in the interview. I think back and I think I read papers in that lab that I wanted to work at, and just familiarizing yourself with what that place does. I mean, everybody likes to know that you're interested in what they're doing. So showing that you are interested in what they're doing, people like that in an interview. They like when you know something about that business or that entity, right? So yeah, do your research, prep for it, know who the people are, and I mean, and be yourself. I again, as cliche as that sounds, maybe I think it's important. And then, I mean, just being tenacious and not being afraid to make a mistake or take a pause or all those things. Nobody's expecting perfection, or coming back to a question. I didn't like how I answered that question. Let me take another shot at it. Let me take another step. Not being afraid of saying, can I think about that? All those things. I mean, just don't be, I mean, it's a nerve-wracking situation. It's incredibly awkward by nature, like an interview. And so I think everybody knows that. And I think the interviewers know that. I mean, in IT, I had to conduct dozens of interviews all the time. And I mean, it's even if you make a blunder, make fun of it, go like, oh, I should have said that or whatever. You know what I mean? It's okay. Just be a human, and people appreciate that. Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
That was great actually, because in my career, I've been in management now probably 20 out of my 30 years. I've probably interviewed close to, and uh, not to diminish it, but I probably had about 1,000 people come through my offices or jobs. Tarpons, I was involved in every interview, right? So we had hundreds of people come through the Tarpons. I guess the biggest advice I can give you you go back to I think it was Gordie Howe or somebody, the only bad shot is the shot not taken. So don't sit there and be quiet. If you freeze, ask them for a drink of water or whatever. Can I take a break? Can I get up and walk around? Because you know what? You're exactly right, Joey, is believe it or not, most people that interview, I've got people in here that are out of school for 10 to 15 years and they're nervous as hell going into every interview. We usually do a panel of 3 interviews. We usually pull 2 technical people and 1 person that's either HR or finance or something totally unrelated. We purposely do that to make sure that we're not getting, pardon the expression, anal retentive on the science side. We want to make sure that we get the best person. So speak openly. If you don't know the answer and you know freezing is not the best thing, we understand that people freeze, but give it your best try. Every one of you as students go in your first 2 weeks with a professor, you've got your professor figured out and you know what they wanted us, out of assignments. If you can pass it in a little late, or if you can put it in early. I've taught at CBU and in the environmental, the health side. My students, I'm very open with them and have that conversation. You gauge the audience, right? It's like anything. Your parents probably tell you this all the time, or your friends. Gauge the room. So walk in. Your first thing that interviewers usually do is break the ice. So you sit there and have a little bit of a conversation. If it's a very uptight type thing, then you keep it very formal and be very respectful. But most I've been involved in, that's the first thing I start to do is joke with students or people that I'm hiring to let them know that, okay, this is a safe area. Let your hair down and let's have a conversation. Because I don't really care if you know everything that's written in a book that's, that you're studying from. I want to know who you are and what you're about, and that what enthusiasm, just as what was said before. So I don't think there's anything wrong you can say. Don't talk about people's weight or color or race or anything like that. I'd avoid all that. But there's nothing wrong with having a conversation, because that's all an interview is at the end of the day. Sure, you're being evaluated on it, but it's all based on that conversation that you're having. So treat it as if you're going and having a coffee with a friend, and somebody else joined you and you have that conversation. I think you're all, if you made it to the interview stage, you have enough technical background or knowledge. You have the backing that's desired. So have that confidence that if you made it that far, then you know what, they probably want me, or they want to know what I'm capable of. And 90% of the time, I want the person and not not as much what they know. It's just like Alana said. I can teach you can teach anybody how to screw in a light bulb, but to do it safely, effectively, and efficiently is really what I want you to do. So I want to get that out of you, right? So, and if you find that people are dragging questions out of you, I'm terrible, because if I feel I know you know the answer, I'm going to prod you. I'm going to keep going until I get that answer, because I'm going to give you that opportunity. And I see a lot of my colleagues do the same thing. I sit back and muse sometimes, because we're not prodding you because you're giving us the wrong answer. We're prodding you to get the rest of the information out, because a lot of them are tick boxes or tick points in government. If you go for government interviews, we've got a prescribed list, and it might say, well, respect is, you're ticking them as you go. If you watch interviewers, they're writing things down and ticking things. It's all keywords. So if somebody's prodding you, don't be insulted by it. Just keep going.
Yeah, and one thing I'll mention as well is like we've all been there. We started as students and
Yeah.
had to interview for those summer positions as well. So everyone's been in those shoes. We're usually not expecting perfection. So again, if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. I know it's easier said than done. And yeah, as mentioned before, if you can prepare for the interview as much as you can, that just makes it go a lot easier. A lot of times it's people approach them like tests or exams where hey, if you're comfortable with it, the better you'll do usually. For a lot of our summer staff positions as well, I will say a lot of it is social. As Alana mentioned, like we can train a lot of people, and we do train a lot of people on the work. It's like you're gonna be in a car for a couple hours with this person every week, and you're gonna be in situations that aren't always the most comfortable, at least in our line of work with conservation. And so you want to be able to, if you're going through a rough day, have a laugh. So it's also the social side of things as well to consider. And that goes both ways too. If you're a summer stat, or if you're looking for summer positions and you don't think you're clicking super well, it's not it's not a bad thing. It just knows you won't vibe well with those people. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Echoing all those sentiments too, as someone who actively hires for every co-op term and summer positions, a huge bit of it is the enthusiasm. Echoing what others have said, you've already got the certifications and some skills there in science, perhaps, that have got you to that interview stage. And it truly is like a fit with the team who you will be working with, right? So is the personality going to mesh? Is there enthusiasm? Is there passion for the field, right? And how are they going to get along with the individuals that they'll work with? So it's a lot of soft skills and just people skills as opposed to just your science facts. And I always appreciate it as an interviewer if you take a moment and think about the question. I think we go in thinking we need to have an answer right away. We need to look smooth, and you can prepare a ton, but you still can't always anticipate what an interviewer is going to ask. So for those who take a minute to collect their thoughts and then respond, I always appreciate that silence because I know they're really thinking about it and approaching it, from a good problem solving perspective, hopefully. So yeah, that's my 2 cents, but thank you for panelists for weighing in on that.
I think we have time for one last question. Justin just put a question in the chat, Jillian and Audrey, and he says, "Hello, I have a question. I'm a 5th year student at Dalhousie and started as a chemistry major, but switched to a minor in management after having a wonderful experience in a management job. I am still very passionate about the sciences though. That said, are there career opportunities available to split management and chemistry student like myself? If there are, would I need a major or a minor in chemistry to qualify for them?"
I think right out of the gates, I'd say someone said it already. Like, don't be afraid of maybe not getting your exact dream job with every single component. Be willing to I've done this twice today, haven't I? Like woven together ideas. Anyways, just regurgitating illustrative techniques. I guess I'd say, anything. Don't be afraid. You're not going to pigeonhole yourself, I'd say, by getting experience in one or the other of those two fields. And I mean, and if you can narrow it down even more, even better, right? Like if you can get a management job at a like a chemical engineering firm, like you know what I mean? Like that's, it's not, yeah. But that being said, I mean, don't be afraid to just like, I don't know, hit Indeed and like type all those things in and see what's out there. You know, like that's the other thing. I mean, if you've got a plan on what you want to do, I mean, do it. Like that's, it's doable. I mean, sound like a super optimist here, but I mean, it really is. It's accomplishable. So, I mean, that's, yeah, that'd be off the top of my head. That'd be my maybe overly short answer, but yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When you think about it, that cross discipline is huge. You know, I told you when I was with CBRM, I was managing I had a $4 million operating budget, and I had a $3.5 million revenue budget because I was collecting tipping fees. So I was managing a lot of money. Sorry, and I had actually a $4 million labor budget. But my overall budget for solid waste was 11 million bucks. But I was managing that, and I was doing it by the seat of my pants, you know, with spreadsheets, all this wonderful stuff, using the foundations and the basis and repeating what everybody else did. My ex-wife, my first wife, was a chartered accountant. She introduced me to pivot tables. I started pulling things apart. I got very interested in the accounting side, and I did my certificate in financial management with St. Mary's, and it was probably the best thing I could have ever done for my accounting friends or colleagues that I worked with, because we could talk, you know, talk the talk versus, you know, it wasn't matchy matchy. I was talking debits, they were talking credits kind of thing, and we got on the same page. So it is a great thing to do. You know, thinking about my technical background, I'm here because of probably my technical background more than anything, but I spend probably 60% of my job managing right now. Whether I'm program managing a bunch of project managers on projects, manage capital budgets that go through. I have an operating team that run Open Hearth Park and Harborside Commercial Park. I'm involved in leases. I'm involved in so you do marry them both. To have somebody young in that position is, to me, very appealing, because nobody thinks of it. I tell my kids, my daughter this year, as I said, fourth year chemistry, she said to me, "What's a good course that I can take that I'd use for the rest of my life?" I said, "Accounting." She said, "What?" I said, "Take accounting. It'll never go wrong, because whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, or working at McDonald's as a managed swing manager, you're going to have to use some form of accounting in your life. It's the premise of business, right? So you might as well be able to talk the talk and walk the walk. So, you know, I wouldn't be afraid to split. And just like I've got a number of colleagues. I look at one of my colleagues was managing projects for Stantec. And now he manages ALS Laboratories, Mike Doucette. Fantastic guy, science background, but now he's taking all kinds of management courses to be able to get to where you're going to be. So don't be afraid. Go in and establish yourself, and you're actually in a better place than a lot of us, because you can pick what path you want to go on once you get there. So think of that as the opportunity that you present yourself by doing that double, you know, by cross majoring like that, or splitting your degree.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo what's been said, it's if you can double major and you don't have an issue with that, that's obviously the most ideal scenario. I know if you want to stick in the chemistry field, but go more of the management side rather than a lot more hands-on stuff, I still would recommend trying to do a few of those jobs that are hands-on, because that gives you an idea when you're at a manager level what folks will need, what folks are dealing with. Like I've worked my way up from volunteering and doing field work in the summers to now to being a biologist and now managing projects. So it's being able to see it at all the different levels, I find's been super helpful. But if that is your final goal, like it doesn't hurt to get all that experience as well. So yeah.
I'll just add in since no one has mentioned it yet, but if there are certain jobs, of course, for which those hard technical skills that you can only get from a degree might be necessary. And one tactic you can take is if there's a job that you know that that's what you're kind of what you would love to end up in, you can always reach out to people and ask for informational interviews to just talk to them about what their day-to-day is and what education they needed to get that job. And so that's just like reaching out by email or however, to have a short conversation and chat with someone who's ended up where you would like to go. And that can be really informative, I think.
It also shows great initiative to the employer that you're invested and interested to take the time as well. I know anyone who's done kind of a cold call to me, those names stand out because they were brave enough to take that initiative, stand up for themselves and find out the information they needed. So I want those kind of initiative driven people on my team, right? Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that, Audrey. It's a great point. All right, I don't think I'm seeing any more questions in the chat. Maybe one last opportunity to call out to the room if you have any remaining questions before we wrap up for the evening.
Justin just put in the chat, awesome. Thank you so much to the panel for your wisdom and advice. So, and I'd like to echo that to our three panelists for joining us this evening and giving up their evening. It's very important to have these events for students because they get to hear, as I said, from different perspectives and different careers, the same threads that that we heard last year from different careers as well. Keep interviewing, keep applying for things. It's not easy. You're going to change several times and just be yourself. And that it's really interesting for me now that this is our second year running this, that it's the same threads that keep coming up. So thank you so much to all three of you for giving us your evening and your perspective. It's very much appreciated. And to the students who have participated and listened, thank you so much. And we hope that it's helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, the seminar coordinator for NSIS, and I can get you directly in touch with our panelists if there is a question. But thank you so much for the evening. And again, thank you so much to our panelists for joining. I will email the three of you when we have it online. So you have it and we can share it, and we will share it with as many people as possible going forward. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was great.
Yeah, thank you. It was great. It was great.
And hopefully we helped out a little bit.
Oh,
I think so, definitely.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all of your input.
Yes, it was great. And you can see in the chat, the students they really enjoyed it. And they, I think it's very helpful to hear personal stories. Yeah, so thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Awesome.
Thank you. Cheers,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.